Welcome to another podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Awakener. We have a great show for you today. I have the Insider with me. Insider, how are you?
I'm doing great, Awakener. Thanks for having me back on the show.
I'm so glad to do a show tonight with you. This is an amazing time to be alive. You're seeing everything unfold, and everyone is being affected by Chinese influence, well, at least in here in Canada. But something as big is going to happen very shortly that we've been predicting for a long time. And it's going to be absolutely amazing to see how the red pilling event is going to spread all across the Western world. And it's going to open a huge can of worms, and everybody's going to know, which we talked about for quite some time. So before we begin, go to theawakener.ca. It's a great resource, material, blog posts. You can read exactly what is happening. Basically, what is happening is a battle of power and control over the world. Who is going to win? And you're watching it unfold, and it's a great time to be alive. Insider, what's new with you?
Well, there's a lot happening north and south of the border. Look at south of the border with the debt ceiling fight. China is also a big issue south of the border too. They found a police station in Manhattan, but at least the U.S. took legal action about it. And there's many more police stations in the U.S. North of the border, we're seeing Trudeau failing and more conservative governments provincially winning in provincial elections. So I think the tide is starting to turn, and people are slowly starting to wake up and see that things just don't smell right.
Things do not smell right in the U.S. You think the U.S. economy is going to turn around the Canadian economy? The news out of, I guess, was the Canadian economy grew 3.1%. Did you see that?
Yeah, but I question some of those numbers and the calculations that they make. It's the same way I question the numbers about unemployment, because they play a lot with GDP and they play with the unemployment numbers as well. So I see a lot of businesses around me that are not doing well, and slowly some of them are just shutting their doors and shuttering and not coming back. So I don't think the economy is as strong as they would like us to believe.
Yeah, I don't think the U.S. currency is going to be saved. They're sending billions and billions of dollars, another 300 million announced today going to Ukraine. There's no stopping this. I don't think. I think we've gotten past the point where the U.S. is going to pay back their debt. It's going to continue to just basically inflate, and it's going to all implode, which is what we predicted for quite some time. Now, if everything's going to implode, what's the point of saving it? Do you know what I mean? We've been
Yep.
talking about that on the podcast for quite some time. In the U.S. specifically, the Durham investigation ended. Everyone is so, wants to know my opinion about the Durham investigation. We said it for quite some time. The Inspector General report and the Durham investigation together are just, it's all the evidence you need to show that the FBI, there's malfeasance or whatever you want to call it. There was bad play. What are your thoughts on that, Insider?
There's no doubt about that. I mean, it definitely showed it, and then on top of it, you could see how the media was twisting the whistleblowers when they were speaking before Congress. You could see they called them so-called whistleblowers. They tried to belittle them, and this is just a typical media tactic. But
Right.
the same thing with, like, everybody knows that the FBI, there's corruption within the FBI. The question is, what do you think, Awakener? Are they going to be able to? Are they going to take action on this, or are they just going to sweep it under the rug as they always have before?
So I think this is a great question. So the Inspector General report showed that the FBI and their abuses of FISA and all the stuff they did was a sham. Together with the Durham report shows one thing, that FBI agent, I can't even pronounce his name properly, Charles McGonigal or something like that. He was actually connected. This is really interesting. So we've talked about this Hunter Biden investigation being a lot bigger than it seems. We've
Right.
talked about that for quite some time. This investigation that the media is telling you is just over a little bit of tax fraud, and he bought a gun and he wasn't supposed to have a gun, is much larger than that.
Right.
It's actually a world-changing investigation, the results of it, because it's going to show that embedded Western politicians are being blackmailed and extorted by foreign powers, and traitors, we've called them for quite some time, are working with our enemies to basically sell us out. The Durham investigation is interesting because it all focused on this one FBI agent where the Russian investigation started. And that FBI agent had access to Patrick Ho and his intelligence information. He was head of counterintelligence for that actual investigation. And Russia and the oligarchs and Putin were basically paying him, thousands and thousands of dollars to what it looks like to quash this investigation, number one, and two, to start a false pretense to protect this investigation, which was the actual truth, which we talked about in the show. In the Patrick Ho investigation, the government came forward with documents that said that they were going to submit, I guess in his case, that they had access to his phones. I guess FISA was what you call it. And this FISA warrant that Patrick Ho had on him probably went all the way back to when Barack Obama was in office. So this whole network of them creating this false pretense of Russia, 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 and surveilling the good guys, us. There's actually good guys surveilling the bad guys during Barack Obama's presidency because it was all starting to go south. And this is the pretext of it. Now, we've talked for quite some time about how everything related to Hunter Biden is going to basically explode. And this is why you're seeing right now these plethora of investigations coming out about, Chinese interference here, all across the Western world. This is all happening right before the biggest indictment, which is going to mass red pill everybody, which we're talking about for quite some time. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. You know how I am. I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop.
Right. The reason why things haven't happened so fast is because, once again, our enemies possess thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons. And this is going to be such an earth-shattering event that, put it this way, the only reason our enemies are able to get us is because of a vast network of politicians that are feeding us an agenda to destroy our society, to weaken us, climate change, all this nonsense. This is their only hope to defeating us and taking control of the earth. They want control. They want the oil. They want the power. And once the first trader goes down, it's going to lead to the second, the third, the fourth, the 10th trader. And once the traders start getting rolled up all across the Western world, the agenda of the establishment elitist agenda that is basically destroying the Western world is going to be full on rejected. At that point, our enemies will no longer have us. So to announce the truth, a lot of things had to be prepared in advance, which is what we've been talking about for quite some time. It's not easy to tell people the truth, unfortunately.
Right. And it has to come in slow quantities for people to absorb it, or else it's just too much for them to take all at once.
Exactly. So if they told you everything right at the start 3 years ago that we were basically infiltrated by the enemy, everyone was working for an enemy nation, everybody would have said there's no way.
Right.
People have to be warmed up to the obvious to understand the whole scheme. Does that make sense to you?
Right. I agree. And I think it's also that people had to themselves see that something doesn't look right or feel right or smell right. So they have to say, something isn't right. I don't know what it is. And they go themselves out and look for the answers. And for example, your website's an excellent resource for them.
Well, I mean, there's no accident. So the first accident or coincidence is that Jeffrey Epstein died in his cell. Okay. Once he was killed, and once it became very clear in the Patrick Ho case that, Hunter Biden was going to go down, oh, shoot, they've been surveilling our phones for years. I'm going to buy myself a gun and try to kill myself. That whole incident, it became very apparent at this point that something had to be done. And this is specifically why COVID came out of the lab. So this is a turning point. The instigation of kind of this red pilling event all across the Western world. So first of all, you had the Russia investigation to stop the Patrick Ho indictment stuff, all the news coming out to affect his counterintelligence cases. Once that reached a point of no return, you then had COVID that came out of the lab specifically, like we told you, when Russia's signaling it, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been following this for quite some time and seeing the buildup of it. It's been a very slow process where a lot of people need to have the world shaken and warm up to this before they can learn the truth. And the truth is going to be world altering.
So do you want to shift gears and talk about Canada a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about Canada.
So, the biggest news was anyone north of the border would have seen that the mainstream media was focusing on the Alberta provincial election, which is basically against Conservatives versus NDP, which is the Socialist Party. There's really two main extremes in Alberta. They either go far right or they go far left. And you saw that the media was trying to play numbers with polls, pretending as if it was neck and neck, or that that the Socialists would have a chance. But if you really looked at the seat count, you all saw that the Conservatives, or the UCP party is what's called over there, were going to win, or at least going to win, if not a majority, then a minority. So what happens on election night Monday was that the UCP won. Danielle Smith, the premier, won a majority, and they did actually very well in the election. And then, so of course, the mainstream media comes out the day after and says, okay, they won a majority, but, and then they give all their buts, and they want to always downplay it and show other things. So you can just see the way the media always narrates things in a very leftist way, and they're never going to cheer on what the majority of voters want or vote for. They always want to put in their socialist agenda,
Of course.
so it is, that becomes very, very obvious, and I just wanted to highlight that to people. So I want people to start waking up and seeing how the mainstream media plays with words and tries to brainwash the public. But I think more and more people are tuning out. They're not interested, and they see the games and they see it's one-sided. They see it's not a balanced view, and they're just disinterested, and they're focusing now on more alternative media sources.
Right. So the media basically wakes people up when they know they have to get ahead of something. In the case of obviously the Chinese influence, you have people talking about it all now. But the reason why people are talking about it is because the Hunter Biden case is about to blow. People are telling, oh, Hunter Biden's in big trouble. Well, we've known he's been in big trouble for quite some time. And you're just telling us now. The Canadian media system is always just the same way. Everything works the same way. Everything is their spin on things. They don't tell you quite the truth until, oh, well, okay. Well, yeah. um, you know, it's really interesting to see the amount of people that are waking up to the media and rejecting it, and people who want to know the actual truth. Um, Here in Canada, it's really certain. Like you can really see that Trudeau, these socialist people, are getting encircled with whatever is happening right now. Do you agree with me?
Oh, big time. So for those who don't know, let's just look at it. Our basically our intelligence service, which is called CSIS, has had knowledge for the last several elections, 2019 and 2021, general elections, federal elections, that there's been direct coercion and persuasion from the Chinese embassy in Ottawa and the Chinese consulates in Toronto and Vancouver that have vehemently attacked, particularly conservative candidates of Chinese origin, and basically pressured or threatened their family members that may be in Hong Kong or in mainland China, and so put pressure on them if they in any way stand against communist China. So once this hits the fan, Trudeau is forced to call for a special investigation. What does he do? He appoints the former governor general, who had a very illustrious career, had quite a reputation. He was originally appointed by the conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper to be the point person or the special rapporteur to decide whether there's going to be a public inquiry or not. And people were thinking, like, this guy is not going to call a public inquiry, because the last time the Liberals had a public inquiry called the Gomery Commission, which was the sponsorship scandal, it sunk the Chrétien and Martin governments and brought in a conservative government. It was quite a huge scandal. And this is a far huger scandal. So
Yeah.
what the media doesn't tell the people is that David Johnston might have been the former governor general, but he's on the board of the Trudeau Foundation, which is a nonprofit radical left-wing foundation, which was actually financed by Chrétien for $120 million of taxpayer money to a private foundation. He has vacationed with Trudeau. He's buddy with Trudeau, and he's spoken very highly about uh, uh, communist China and favorably about them. And this is the guy that's appointed to decide whether there's going to be a public inquiry or not. Then there's more stuff that the media hasn't even exposed, which is that he's like 80 something years old. He's quite
Right.
old. The person that's with him, Sheila Block, I believe is her name, is a solicitor from the largest law firm in Toronto, Tories. She has special security clearance to review all the private CSIS intelligence on the Chinese interference in our elections. She has given over $7,000 in donations in the last few years to the Trudeau Liberals. So she's already conflicted there. And on top of it, the law firm that she works for and all the people around her on her team that were helping her in this investigation are all from this law firm, Tories. They all had security clearance, it's my understanding.
Right.
And they were all able to go through the intelligence gathering that CSIS did on Chinese interference. Now, Tories as a law firm, this is the kicker. Tories as a law firm brags about the business dealings and the representation they do for the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, you can't make this up. I mean, you remember you called me and you were like, "Oh, yeah." He said that there's no need to have a kind of like a
Public
look
inquiry.
into all this, an
Yeah.
inquiry,
Yeah.
and we both we both like, "Oh yeah, well we expected that."
Yeah.
This is going to be a very very severe scandal, and Hunter Biden's case is not just a small tax case. And this is going to really change. I told you, it's going to change the world, whatever is coming out and when it comes out. And this is why the magnitude of the situation, why things are happening the way they're happening. Here in Canada, you can just look at Trudeau, and Trudeau is in a world of panic right now.
Yeah.
He is very stressed out. Freeland, I saw her today. She's looked like she's aged 10 years in the last like 6 months.
There's no doubt about it. And I'm going to tell you something from the inside in Ottawa, which is an interesting thing. Many people may not know this. A lot of the staffers, including Telford and Butts, when Trudeau won in 2015, they left Queen's Park. They left the Ontario provincial government legislature, and they moved over to Ottawa to support to support Trudeau because he was their new shining star. And they could see that the Liberals were falling down in Ontario. Well, what people may not know what's happening recently in Ottawa is there's a lot of staffers and a lot of people leaving the federal government, leaving the federal Liberal Party and switching over to come and rebuild the Ontario Liberal Party. So that means they're already smelling the blood in the water like sharks. They're smelling the blood in the water.
Right.
They know that this is not good. I know that there's internal divisions among Liberal MPs. They're not vocal about it. They're not public about it whatsoever. But there is issues there where they are concerned that if they won by Chinese interference, or if the foreign government has interfered in our elections, and it's not just only China, it's Iran, it's other countries as well, they're very concerned and they're smelling the blood in the water themselves.
All right, we're going to head to the Patreon because we're going to talk about some really dark stuff right now. We're going to head there right now.